Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings upon each and everyone who may view this video. I'm here with Brother Mustafa Ahmed, and we're going to have a discussion about the Hebrew scriptures and whether or not the scribes have changed and altered the Hebrew scriptures. And so I'm the author of the book, Consider Islam Disproving the Patriots of Propaganda. The book will be released, inshallah, by 2019. That's the projected date at this point. And so, Brother Mustafa, how are you doing today?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm doing well. And how are you? Well, I'm doing well this evening. It's night here.
It's night there. That's right.
Your place.
Alhamdulillah. Did you tell? You said it was a 5-hour difference or 6?
Yeah, there's a 5 hours. It's 20 to 10 now.
Yeah.
PM. So yeah, we're talking 5-hour difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for this Zoom chat with you. I mean, I know you're really busy as well, Brother Kenny, plus your new book releasing, mashallah, and with your knowledge, and we can learn so much from you, and we're so looking forward, inshallah, for your release of your book. I mean, that's something we're looking forward for. We'll definitely want you to give us when it's going to release, the price, etc. So for us, it's something that we're looking forward for. Jazakallah khair for your hard effort. May Allah accept all your effort and all your time. I know you're really busy. You've got a lot of projects going on, and thank you very much for making this time. I did discuss with you, Brother Kenny, regarding the topic. I mean, inshallah, we'll make more videos on this, more in time. But this is just a small snippet of what we're going to discuss about. Did the scribes make any changes to the Hebrew text? Now, our Christian friends, and I want to emphasize, I'm calling them friends because they are our friends.
Mm-hmm.
We respect them. We have nothing against our Christian friends, our Jewish friends. Actually, we don't have anything against anybody. To us, they're all human beings. They're the creation of God, and we respect them to the maximum. We want to show them love and respect, and we don't want them to feel that we have some sort of a hatred for them, because we have no hatred. As Muslims, we are not to have any hatreds towards anyone, not even towards animals. And so I really want to emphasize that when we do speak on this subject, we are not trying to make a mockery or make any sort of derogatory statements or comments or anything horrible towards our friends, our brothers, our sisters of different faiths. We love them, we respect them, and we just want them to think deeply. Not that we're here to convert them or to say to them, you know what, now that we've proved it to you, that's it, you're wrong, you're this, you're that. No, we're not name calling, we're not here to call names. We don't want to insult anyone.
Right.
Allah tells us in the Quran not to insult. So let's make this clear. And I respect Brother Kenny, because I've seen so many of your debates and your discussions, and I've not come across any time you've insulted. And that's one thing that I've really learned from you and from other brothers, that this doesn't lead to anything moral, if you know what I mean.
That's what I'll tell
so the topic here is that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, carry on, my brother.
Well, I was just saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran to invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and kind words, and argue with them in ways that are best, most gracious. And so, yeah, it's never our objective to offend anyone, by no means. And I strictly do this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to defend the truth and the beauty of Islam and nothing more. So all these discussions, and even the book itself, and if I engage in debate or if I create videos, whatever I'm doing, I do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, only to defend Islam and to guide people to the truth and try to establish what the truth actually is, and never to offend. So, alhamdulillah. So let's
alhamdulillah. So let's crack on, basically. So the topic, as we said, did the scribes make any changes to the Hebrew text? Now, 50 to 100, maybe 150, 200 years ago, if one was going to ask this question, then the person who is speaking against the Hebrew scriptures will most probably find it slightly difficult to convince them that there was some sort of scribal changes, etc., because we didn't have those information as much as we do now.
Right.
They're more open now. Let's just say that the information was available, don't take me wrong, but they were available with the elite, with the like the scholars. They were aware of it, but the scholars would not share it, if you know what I mean. I'll give you an example. For example, Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra, a Jewish scholar who was not only fluent in Hebrew, he was also fluent in Arabic as well. And he was aware of certain changes or certain problems in the Old Testament. For example, Ibn Ezra would make commentary on book of the Torah. And he will focus on certain verses from certain books or passages, and he'll say, well, this could not have been written by Moses. And then he would try, he wouldn't say literally like this wasn't written by Moses. He'll say there is a secret behind this, and whoever knows the secret will be silent, if you know what I mean. In other words, to say, well, the secret is that Moses is writing, but don't talk about it. Let's just keep it hush hush. It was something that we were aware of, yet we couldn't convince someone. But now we have unlimited amount of information. I'll give you an example. For example, I was reading, I purchased this book. This book is called The Textual Criticism of the Old Testament by John Bragg. This book, it's not actually a book, it's a textbook, let's just say. It's just full and full and full of information and just and when I say information, I'm talking about this book is just full of scribal errors and scribal changes and so on, and it goes deep into the Hebrew text and how the difference from the Masoretic text, etc. So we have books written by scholars who have dealt with this subject. Now, I've always understood that there are different versions of the Torah. Our Christian friends, I'm not going to talk about the Jewish friends now, I'm just saying our Christian friends, because we normally deal with our Christian friends more than the Jews. Our Christian friends are adamant that the Torah is exactly the same. The Torah has not been changed. So they would always show us their Bible, and they're going to say, look, this book is the same. So we go to the Pentateuch, the book of Numbers and the Pentateuch, etc. It's the same. So they keep on showing us their book, whether it's the NIV, RSV, KJV, etc. The fact is they have the Masoretic book. But they don't want to discuss or mention that we have the Samaritan Torah now. So, so now we've got an issue here. We've got the Samaritan Torah. So who's gonna discuss about the differences between the Samaritan and the Masoretic?
Right.
But it doesn't stop, because recently the new discovery from 1947 in the Qumran caves, we have the DSS Bible, and this book goes back to the earliest time of when Jesus would have, with the time of Jesus, the books that he would have had. And we'll talk a bit about this if we have time, because time is kind of short.
Sure.
So the fact that there are different versions of the Bible, the Samaritan, the Masoretic, the Septuagint, the Latin Vulgate, the Peshtita, I mean, we have different versions of the Torah. And so that means that the Torah itself is not exactly the same as our friends would say it is. We can understand that. Amazingly, we have, as we're all aware of, Jeremiah 8:8, and you're aware of Jeremiah 8:8.
Yes.
The beautiful thing about Jeremiah 8:8, the earliest manuscript, which is the Dead Sea Scrolls, the fragments, there are so many verses and passages that are not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Why? Because they're not available. They're either deteriorated, or they're missing, or they probably wasn't even written.
Right.
But one verse that we can be sure about is Jeremiah 8:8, which says, "How do you say we are wise? And Yahweh's law is with us. But behold, the false pen of the scribes has worked falsely. Jeremiah 8:8.
Yes.
That's found in 4Q70. 4 meaning Q meaning K4 number 70. So
Right.
4Q70. So we have that preserved. Now, coming to the idea that the Torah was always the same as the time of Jesus, or the time of Moses from all the way to now, I think that is a ludicrous claim, a bold claim made, because we have no manuscripts that date back to the time of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Moses supposed to have written the Torah scrolls roughly 3,500 years ago, and the earliest manuscript under our possession dates around 200 BCE. That's the DSS fragments. How many years gaps is there between the time of Moses and the DSS? Nearly 1,200 years.
Yeah.
So now you have a 1,200 year missing gap between the time of Moses and the earliest manuscript. How could you claim to have the original Torah when there's a 1,200 year gap?
Yes.
I mean, I really emphasize, and I want my Christian and my Jewish friends to understand and acknowledge this, that when you have a 1,200 year gap, and we have no oral tradition from the Jews, there is no oral tradition that goes back. There is no oral tradition. How do you know that what you have is exactly the same as it was? We can't be. We understand that the same, whether it's the Masoretic Bible or the Septuagint Bible, or the tell us that according to the book of Second Kings, that Hilkiah, the high priest, informed Shaphan the scribe, I have discovered the book of the law in the Lord's temple. Mm-hmm. So he is telling us, the high priest informed that the high priest is telling us that he found the law, the Torah of Moses in the temple. Mm-hmm. I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating, that during the time of Josiah, if the Torah was still with them, then why would that be such a amazing discovery that they found the Torah? I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, think about it like this. Alhamdulillah, we have the Quran now. But if you went to your old home or somewhere and you say, hey, look, I found a copy of the Quran in my closet, you wouldn't go bashing your head and stripping your clothes like the Bible tells us that, the king stripped his clothes and everything, because you're going to think, alhamdulillah, that's another version, that's another copy of the Quran for my collection. Mm-hmm. Here we understand, according to 2 Kings 22:8, 23 to 23, 24, and 2 Chronicles 34:14, that the high priest, he finds the book of the law, and King Josiah is like, wow, this is amazing, man. You found the Torah. So what does he do? Josiah got rid of all the medium, the spirits, the household gods, the idols. He breaks all of that. He makes Jerusalem the way it should be again. Why? Because he read it in the Torah again. Mm-hmm. Now this is evident. And remember, this happened during the year 640 to 609 BCE, before Christ. So we're talking during the time of Moses all the way to even Josiah, there was no tradition of oral tradition. Yeah. There was no oral tradition, because if it was, in the Bible is telling us that they just found the law. Do you see how it works? And we don't have any oral tradition anyway. Mm-hmm. Remember, they came out of exile, for crying out loud. Right. Ezra's time of Ezra, they were in exile. These Jews were like scattered. Where did they even have the Torah? They were too busy asking Ezra, can you give us the Torah? Or Ezra's revealing the Torah to them. So they didn't have oral tradition. They could have said, we don't need Ezra's one. We've got our imam, we've got our rabbi, we've got Rabbi so-and-so, he can relate to us. No. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the issues and problems that I find fascinating, that needs to be reiterated. Now, before I turn to you, Kenny, I just want to elaborate on something else. When our Christian friends tell us that why don't we Muslims follow the Torah, which they have, what exactly do they mean by the word Torah? Right. I mean, we understand Torah means guide, teach, i.e. a guidance, a teaching, a doctrine, an instruction. That's what Torah is. Now, if the word Torah means teaching, sorry about that. Let me just turn that off for a second. If the word Torah means teaching, instructions, then Muslims don't have a problem. Let me elaborate quickly. There are supposed to be 613 laws in the Torah, which are instructions and rules. Take for instance, not to commit sodomy with one's father, Leviticus 18:7. Not to commit incest with one's father's wife, Leviticus 18:8. Not to wrong someone, not to borrow on interest, not to lie, not to steal anyone's property, not to defraud, not to possess or testify false testification in court, Leviticus, etc., etc. All those laws are no problem for Muslim, because we can accept those laws. We accept that sodomy is haram, having sexual intercourse with your father's wife, second wife is haram, is bad, buying and selling illegally is haram, borrowing on interest is haram, testifying false testifying in court is haram, stealing someone's property is haram, not to defraud is haram. We don't have an issue with that. So when you say Torah, the law, then yes, you're right. We agree that can't be an issue, because this is what we mean. When Allah gave the Torah to Musa alayhi salam, he gave him the law, the instruction. Surah 5, verse 43, we read, yet how will they appoint you a judge when they have the Torah with them, wherein there is Allah's judgment, and still they turn away from it? The fact is they are not believers. Now, this is interesting. The Jews came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for a judgment. They came for a ruling. This is what they meant by the Torah. Allah is telling them they have the Torah, meaning they have the law, they have the ruling, they have the teaching, they have the judging. Everything is in there, what Allah has already given. This doesn't mean that the Genesis, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy is there, because they are stories. They are stories. We don't want to know about those stories. Those stories can be fabricated. We're talking about the law. So when we say that the law has been corrupted, yes, changes could have been made in the law. And before I continue a bit more, I want, if you can elaborate and give us some of your understanding on this corruption. Sure. Brother Kenny.
Well, obviously, as you mentioned in Jeremiah 8:8, we already see indications that something's wrong. There's been changes occurring. And so I want to talk about this from a perspective of the signs that we see in the scriptures themselves. And it's interesting that the Christians will accuse the Muslims of not, following the law. But there's Bibles out there. I've seen many of them, as a matter of fact, where the Old Testament is not even included in the Bible. It's just the Old Testament version, right? And also they are, and I mean no offense by saying this, but it's a fact and a reality, where they say we live under the new covenant. They're in the old covenant. They live under the new covenant, so they don't need the old covenant. Of course, we know this is the workings of Paul. And Paul, I want to approach this from a different perspective, because I think it's a very interesting perspective. And it also is something that I'm going to be addressing in a debate at the end of April, inshallah. I'm going to be going to California to debate a Christian on the topic of Paul, whether or not he was a deceiver. And so in my research and my study, I've come across some very interesting things. And, and so I want to approach that from this perspective in regards to Paul. And I think you'll find it very interesting. Obviously Paul says that to the Jew, he became a Jew. To the Gentile, became a Gentile, became all things to all men. And Paul is supposed to be a Pharisee, right? But I question whether or not he was a true Pharisee, because a Pharisee is an Orthodox Jew. And an Orthodox Jew would not say some of the things that Paul states, right? And so,
true.
It doesn't make sense. The things that Paul states, and we're going to go over a few things here, but he's supposed to be the Pharisee of the Pharisees, right? He makes this proclamation himself in Galatians 1:14. He says, "And I profited in the Jews' religion above many of my equals in my nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers." So he's saying he was the Jew of the Jews. He was the the most zealous and the most ambitious, and I think that it's in his ambition, the ambition of Paul. I personally believe, and I'm going to address this in this debate with this Christian, and I kind of don't want my tactics for this debate. Well, if
yeah, of course, no.
He's not going to be able to defeat this argument anyway.
Defend it, yeah.
But Paul, I believe personally, Paul was out to corrupt Christianity from the beginning, and he used, let's put it like this: if you're gonna try to destroy something from the inside out, what do? If you send a spy in, right? You send a spy in, they begin to corrupt the organization from the inside out. And I believe that this is what Paul has. He's admitted to being a liar. He says, for the Jew, I'm a Jew. For the Gentile, I'm a Gentile. I'm the Pharisee of all the Pharisees.
Yes.
I'm all things to all men. But note what he does in the scriptures themselves, which speak directly against what is stated in the Old Testament. And so we see a change there from that perspective as well. We see the scribes themselves, whoever the authors of the we believe the scholars believe that there's seven
books and
7 books that are attributed to Paul, and there's others that they are questioning, right? So the scribes themselves have begun disputing with the Old Testament in the New Testament. So we see signs of this. So we have to ask ourselves, why would Paul, for one, if he's a Pharisee, he's an Orthodox Jew, why would he be persecuting Christians in the first half of the first century? The Christians at that time were extremely small.
Wait, hold on, Brother Kenny.
Sure.
Paul goes. Sorry, I just want to add to it. Paul goes as far as saying that Book of Acts goes as far as saying that Paul was the student of Rabbi Gamaliel.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, why would Paul be persecuting the Christians who are such a small group when the Romans were, the most prominent of all groups, and of course the Jews were under Roman rule. But so that's where their biggest concern should be, not with the small group of Christians, right? So he claims.
No.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying you're right.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah.
I'm just agreeing with you. Like, it's so true that why would they go? I mean, the Christians were so minute. It's like saying that I run Britain and I've got a few Eskimos in a little area, and I'm gonna go and fight the Eskimos. I'm like, well, what's Eskimos got to do with like the British Empire,
right?
And the military and all of that.
And as silly as that sounds, that's the situation that we're dealing with here, because it's absurd within itself. So he claims also that he's from Tarsus, while Tarsus is one of the 3 major centers of Greek and Roman mythology. Matter of fact, it's the center of Jewish thinking, right? Tarsus is the center of Jewish thinking, and it's not a center of Jewish thinking is what I meant to say. So it's the center of Greek and Roman mythology. So if Paul, indeed, like you had mentioned, if he's a student of Gamaliel, why would he be working for the priest, the high priest, to persecute the Christians in Damascus? Why would there be a need for that? So in Acts 22:3, I believe is the verse he was about to mention. He says, I'm a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, and I studied under Gamaliel, and was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors. I was just as zealous for God as any of you are today. Right? So he's putting himself, he's basically giving himself credibility here. And so we need to point out.
In other words, Brother Kenny, you're saying that Paul, being the student of Gamaliel, cannot be true, like saying the high priest or the chief priest in Israel now is apparently working for the Nazis.
Right, right. So remember, we have to remember this is the same man that says, for the Jew I became a Jew, for the Gentile I became a Gentile, became all things for all men, so that I may profit a few.
Wouldn't you call that deception?
Yeah, it's absolutely full of deception. And everything that Paul is bringing, for one, he's speaking against Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus, the son of Mary. He also speaks against Moses and the Torah, peace and blessing be upon Moses. So another thing that needs to be pointed out is that the high priest would be a Sadducee, right? So why would a Pharisee,
Yes.
which Paul claims to be the Pharisee of all Pharisees, why would he be working for a Sadducee to persecute the Christians? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna actually bring that up. You're right. He was a Sadducee. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how would a Sadducee? Yeah. Of course,
So
yeah. Pharisee. They
Acts,
wouldn't mix. It's like
yeah,
I don't know what example I can give now. It's like saying the Indian army and the Pakistani army military general working together side by side,
right.
and they're trying to get like them killed. You're like, well,
Right.
how could that be? Because they're like already fighting each other.
Right.
So,
What it sounds like is happening here is that the scribes themselves, whoever the writer of the book of Acts is, basically is trying to give Paul some credibility and calling him a Pharisee, calling him the Pharisee of the Pharisees. He's the most zealous. He's seeking knowledge. He's highly ranked and all these things. These are all self-proclamations, right? This is all whoever.
but Brother Kenny, can I just
Sure.
Sorry, Brother Kenny, I just want to add to, because you're bringing up some really, really good points, and I'm really like fascinated. All I'm saying is that when Paul, the idea that Paul is deceiving people, and the book of Acts, like you said, we don't know who wrote it.
Right.
Well, I don't personally think that they even thought that their writing is going to become scripture. They just wrote it for that time, not knowing it's going to become scripture. So, for example, if me and you, we wrote something down, like, okay, I wrote an article and you wrote an article, or your book. Okay, like your book is the best example. You've written a book and it's out in Amazon. Could you believe your book to be part of the Bible?
Right. It's ridiculous. Or when I update my blog, I just recently started a blog through my website. Matter of fact, I don't know if you've seen it, www.kennybomer.com, plain and simple. But it's like it's the same, as if something that you've written in your blog is now going to become part of the word of our God, our Creator, or the either the literal speech of our God, our Creator, or the inspired speech. It's just absurd, and that's what we have here. A bunch of letters.
Exactly.
Right. So the other thing is,
it's the same as saying that, brother. It's the same as saying Tupac. He wrote songs, and now his songs are being sold, or they've been in some university or somewhere. Right. They're looking at his lyrics. He never thought of his songs going that far. He just thought, I'll just write some songs and lyrics and make some money out of it.
Yes.
So again, that comes down to money. They traffic it for a miserable price. They traffic. Yes. Woe to those who write the book with their own hands.
Right.
Traffic it for a miserable price. I
personally believe Paul was simply up to no good, period, right? Whoever wrote the book of Acts, the book of Acts is called Acts of the Apostles, but what it boils down to, that book is mainly about Paul. Now, there's some mention of Peter, which he would have been a part of the Ebionites, the earliest followers of Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him. But that was done away with, right? That's their way of thinking, which would have been more consistent with how we believe in Islam, alhamdulillah. That was done away with, and it's a common saying that the victor writes history. And so in this situation in the book of Acts, we see that whoever wrote the book of Acts has Paul as being the winner in the situation. And it also needs to be pointed out that Paul's teachings fit perfectly with the Greek state of mind, right? They follow right in line with the Greek mentality, and they don't fall in line with the Torah. They just simply don't. And so a couple of examples of this is eating flesh and drinking blood. So back in the day, it was common practice for someone to, if they had an animal, whatever animal, it doesn't matter, they would chop a limb off, right? They would chop the limb off, and they would eat the limb, but keep the animal alive and tourniquet the limb. So they chop the limb off, eat that particular limb, tourniquet the wound so it wouldn't bleed out, the animal wouldn't bleed out, and they would try to preserve it. They didn't have refrigeration, and so they would eat off of this animal 2 or 3 different times before the animal actually died. And so keep that in mind. But in the book of Genesis, chapter 9, verse 4, it says, "You must not eat the flesh with its lifeblood in it. Okay, so this is basically telling us, it's telling mankind, do not eat an animal that has been wounded. Do not eat an animal that's been wounded that is still alive. Even though you're eating just its limb, you're still eating. You would be eating an animal, a part of the body of the animal that's still alive. And so the Torah is very strict about this. This means that people are not to eat the flesh of any animal which is still living, because it's the epitome of cruelty, right? Of course, the animal can't feel the limb being eaten at the time. It's not being eaten alive in that sense, but the animal is still alive. It's still suffering, and the Torah speaks. It's supposed to speak against cruelty. So in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 12, verse 21, it discusses the proper way to slaughter animals for consumption. And also in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 25, verse 4, we also see other issues regarding cruelty of animals, where it says, do not muzzle the ox while it's treading out in the grain. And the reason being because the ox he's muzzled, and so therefore he's out in the field and he sees this
wants to eat grass, and he can't eat grass. You're preventing him from taking his own sustenance and all of that. Again, remember, you're quoting from the teachings, the guidance, the Torah.
Right.
Do you see that? Go on, carry on.
Contrarily, Paul says in 1 Corinthians, it says, for it is written, he points out the law of Moses. He says in 1 Corinthians 9, verses 9 and 10, it says, for it is written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out in the grain. Is it the oxen that God is concerned about, or does he say altogether it's for our sakes? So Paul is basically undermining the law of Moses.
Yep. So it's misquotes it. So he completely distorts it.
It's
good at distorting stuff.
Right, redirecting the law of Moses, where the Torah states that you should be kind to animals, and so Paul's basically suggesting that these verses aren't about the animals at all. You can don't be concerned about the animals. It's basically that these are just directed to humans for whatever reason. So.
But he was supposed to be the Pharisee of a Pharisee, a learned man from Rabbi
Pharisee of the Pharisees. So why would a person who has this great Jewish upbringing, and he has knowledge above knowledge, and he's the Pharisee of the Pharisees, the most zealous of all among you, why would he dare change or attempt to change such a basic law? Commandment. You don't harm animals. It's just far-fetched.
Because he wasn't interested in the animal. I mean, like you said, when the Torah tells us that do not eat certain flesh kind of meat, etc. According to Romans 14:20, I believe, all flesh are clean. I mean, you can eat any food now. So God tells us which is unclean and which is clean, i.e., I mean, in a way, it goes back to the idea of when our Christian friends tell us, oh, you guys eat camel meat, and the Torah tells us camel meat is prohibited, whereas Paul himself is declaring that camel meat is not prohibited because you can eat all flesh. It's all clean. And you know what I mean? But besides, we don't want to divert, but I'm just saying that Paul himself has gone against the ruling of God, because according to the book of Psalms, the law of God will never fade away.
Never change. Matter of fact, also in Proverbs 19:21 states that says, "Many are the plans of the mind of man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." So, man comes along, led by Shaitan, and tries to alter and tries to change the word of our God, our Creator. And so we see evidence of this. Also in the book of Job, it says, "But it is he who is unchangeable." Talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is he who is unchangeable, and who can turn him back? What he desires, that he does. And also in the book of Job, in the 42nd chapter, verse 2, I believe. Verse 2. It says, "I can do all things."
Yeah, you know your Bible, don't you?
Huh? It says,
you know your Bible, don't you?
Alhamdulillah. It says, I know that you can do all things. The purpose, the purpose is yours, and that it cannot be thwarted. If I remember correctly, alhamdulillah.
Which one are you taking? The Samaritan or the Masoretic.
There you go. So it basically boils down to this is all self-serving innovations from Paul. So First Corinthians is we know is one of the 7 undisputed letters of Paul, and in First Corinthians he's making these drastic innovations and basically challenging the law of Moses. So he brings up the law of Moses and basically undermines it. And we see him do this repeatedly with Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus, the son of Mary. He does the same thing. All the contradictions of Paul and Jesus, we see the same contradictions with Paul and the law of Moses. Okay, so that's why I wanted to bring it up from this perspective. Also, another example, let me just point out, once again, a Pharisee or an Orthodox Jew would never take away from the law. That's just far-fetched to think that they would do that. Even someone that had that much knowledge, it would mean so much to him if he spent all the time gaining that knowledge. He would never change that thinking, right? I'd say never change that thinking. He'd be let's put it like this, he'd be very reluctant to change that type of thinking.
Of course.
So also another example is the eating the body and drinking the blood of Jesus, right? So, obviously the Bible states that you're not to be cruel to animals. You're not to consume the flesh and drink the blood of animals that and that have not been slaughtered properly and all those things. Don't be cruel to them. But so to suggest that that we should drink the blood and eat the flesh of the Messiah, whereas in the Old Testament there's no verses whatsoever that suggest any such a thing, that we should consume the flesh of the Messiah or drink the blood of the Messiah. Is there anything in the Old Testament that makes such a proclamation? Absolutely not. But as a matter of fact, in Deuteronomy 12 and Leviticus 70, it forbids such practices of consuming things that aren't approved, right? But this is let me make this point in regards to consuming the flesh of people and drinking the blood of people. This was a common practice among pagans and cannibals. We still have cannibalism that exists in certain parts of Indonesia. Matter of fact, in the Papua Mountains, where they still consume the flesh of people. And the reason back then and the reason now that they still do this is because they believe that when they consume the body and drink the blood of a person, that they actually take the power of that person upon into
wow.
Right? And so we see this in the communion of the Christians, where they here's my body broken for you. Here's the cup that I've shed. Take this in remembrance of me. And so those are verses that Paul supposedly wrote, right? So he's shifting the blame to Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus the son of Mary, in the scriptures themselves. Even though in the Old Testament it says not to do these things against the animals, but now suddenly in the New Testament now we can eat the Messiah and drink the blood of the Messiah. But it's not Paul that says it. He says that Jesus said to do it. So Paul is being crafty in everything that he says. Remember, he says in the scriptures themselves, he says, I come with guile and with craftiness. And he says that once again, I'm going to be all things to all men. He admits to being a liar. He says, I've taken from this church to give to this church. So over and over and over again, we see the deceptions of Paul. And I want to stress that the importance of understanding that this practice of consuming the flesh of people and being a cannibal, that comes from pagan beliefs and from cannibalistic beliefs, that these people truly believe that they would inherit or absorb or be infused by the power or the prestige or whatever the case might be of the person that they're actually eating. They feel like they would take their aura. And now we have Christians believing for all these centuries that by consuming the cracker and consuming the wine on Sunday morning, that somehow Jesus is within them and
the mass. Yeah. No, I mean, so one thing, right? So, no, of course, Jazakallah khair for elaborating this message. I mean, you just went on a deeper level by explaining or giving us information how Paul being the Pharisee of a Pharisee, the student of Rabbi Gamaliel, how he distorted the scriptures being a Jew.
Yes.
But we have to also elaborate, which if I can elaborate a little bit on this, Brother Kenny, how there are information from Jews. I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example. According to Jewish rabbis, found in Zohar Chadash on Songs of Songs 74d, the true revelation of God's divinity is through his holy names. And the Torah itself is a string of God's holy names. It consists of 600,000 letters, which represents the 600,000 souls of Israel. Now, that is what the rabbis were telling us, that according to the Torah, it had 600,000 letters. However, when we count the Torah, the letters from the Torah, the modern day Torah, we find it has 304,805 letters, which means there are 295,195 letters missing. Now, this is a bit of a problem where the Jews themselves, rabbis, are confirming letters that the Torah had, and when we count it, we see roughly 300,000 letters missing. Now, according to the Jews, according to Christians, there is no abrogation in the Bible. Whatever is written, that's it. So my question would be to my Jewish Christian friends, where did those 295,195 missing letters go? I mean, the Bible tells us that you shall not add or subtract anything from the Torah. I'm sure you're aware of that in the Bible. I'm going to read to you a couple of I'll read to you this verse from the Masoretic Torah, and then I'll read the same verse from the Samaritan Torah. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. Covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Exodus 20:17, Masoretic Torah. I'm going to read the same now from the Samaritan. So I read to you the Masoretic, right? This is the Samaritan. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, and thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his friend, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. And when it so happens that the Lord brings you to the land of Canaan, which you are coming to possess, you shall set up you shall set up there for you great stones, and plaster them with plaster, and write on the stones all words of the law. And it shall become for you that across the Jordan you shall raise these stones, which I command you today, in mountain Gerizim, and you build there the altar of the Lord and the God of you, to the altar of the Lord God of you, altar of the stones, so and so, so and so, so and so. Now, I'm trying to figure out, how did the Samaritan Torah have such an extended version comparing, and I'm just going to quickly just pull this out just so my Christian friends can see it. So I'm just going to compare this Samaritan version with the Masoretic version. You see, it's missing. Now, I would like to know who made this mess. Who made this mess? Somebody made it.
How did it come about? Obviously, go ahead.
I'm going to carry on with a few more, and then I'll stop, and then I'll let you give me those answers. Sure. Obviously, as Muslims, we'll give it from our side. But the reason we're recording this is so that our Christian friends get the gist of what we're trying to approach them with. let me give you another few example, quick ones, fast examples. So then I'll let you carry on.
Sure.
Genesis 15:11, Septuagint Torah. And the birds came down upon the bodies, even upon the divided parts of them, and Abraham sat down by them. Genesis 15:11, Masoretic Torah. And the birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, and Abraham drove them away. Genesis 15:11, Samaritan Torah. And the eagle came down upon the carcasses, and Abraham took them back. So one says Abraham sat down next to them, one says Abraham drove them away, and another one said Abraham took them back. Now, I don't understand that we have different versions of the Torah. I'm pretty sure there's been some sort of a scribal change here, or some sort of an alteration took place.
Absolutely.
Think of it like this: that if we, okay, I'll give you another. I really like this example that I discovered. Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab at the command of the Lord. He buried him in the valley in the land of Moab near Beth Peor, and no one knows his burial place to this day. Deuteronomy 34:5 and 6, Masoretic Torah. We all know that God apparently, according to the Torah, God buried Moses. This is what we find in the earliest fragments, the DSS, the earliest fragments. This is what the DSS tells us, my brother. Moses, the servant of the Lord, died in the land of Moab according to the word of the Lord, and they, Israelites, buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beer Peor, but no one knows of his burial place to this day. Deuteronomy 34:5 to 6. Did you catch the problem? The Masoretic Torah, which postdates the DSS, states Yahweh buried Moses. However, the DSS, which predates the Masoretic text, states they, i.e. the Israelites, buried him in the land. The other problem is, if the Israelites buried Moses in Moab, then surely they would know the location to where the exact place is. The text on both manuscripts states no one knows till this day. Again, indicating the author wrote much later. So the problems that arise in, and I'll give you another quick one, and this is a really the best one, and I think I'll close it for now on this one. This is found in Deuteronomy 27:4 in the Masoretic Torah, which Masoretic meaning written around the 10th or 11th century. So it's roughly 1,000 years old. This is the Torah that is actually used now by the Jews and Christians, the Masoretic that we Masoretic Torah says, and when you have crossed the Jordan, set up these stones on Mount Ebal, Ebal in the English text, as I command you today, and coat them with plaster. The Samaritan Torah, and when you have crossed the Jordan, set up the stones on Mount Gerizim, as I command you today, and coat them with plaster. The above problematic verses have only one solution, and that is which one is correct, and which corrupted. Thanks to the Bible scholars, we have confirmation that the Torah has been tampered with, and I'll tell you how. According to Gill's exposition of the entire Bible, in his commentary he writes, here the Samaritan version has Gerizim instead of Ebal, which is generally thought to be the willful corruption of the Samaritans. Adam Clarke's commentary, and have no doubt that the Jews have here corrupted the text through their enmity to the Samaritans. And just to make it clear quickly, in case someone says to us, well, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, they're the same mountain. According to Deuteronomy 11:29, it says, when the Lord your God brings you to the land and helps you take possession of it, you must pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and curse at Mount Ebal. There's a distinction between the two mountains. So you can't tell me this mountain and that mountain is the same, because Deuteronomy 11:29 has already made a distinction that one you curse and one you bless. So we can see that there has been textual corruption. And we'll go more in that, but if you want to elaborate more on this, my brother, and give us more of your views.
Well, you mentioned the death of Moses in the scriptures, and I want to close with pointing something out in regards to signs that the various writers of scriptures are disputing with one another. And I'm going to point that out by making mention of the resurrection of the dead. Note what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:44. It says that basically Paul's saying that the body that rises from the grave is going to be the same body as the body that died. Okay?
Yeah.
And so he uses an analogy. He's making the claim that the body is not going to be the same body that died. The body that rises from the grave is not going to be the same body that died. He's saying that it's a spiritual body. And so he uses the analogy of a seed being planted, and when it grows, it turns into a flower, and those two things are distinctly different. And he's drawing, using the analogy to discuss the body of Jesus as rising from the grave and being a spiritual body. Of course, we know as Muslims that we don't believe this happened. They did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, but it was made to appear as such. So we reject that as Muslims. But I'm pointing out the difference between what Paul is saying and the pushback that we see in the book of Luke per se, where in the book of Luke you see that we have doubting Thomas. He didn't believe that Jesus, peace and blessing be upon him, was crucified, and so, he doesn't believe that he was raised from the dead. And in the story in the Bible, in the book of Luke, we see that Jesus is coming and he's saying, "Here's my flesh," and he's showing him his side, he's showing him his hands, he's eating broiled fish and honeycomb, which indicates that he's in a physical body. And so we see, if you see what's going on here, we have Paul saying that Jesus is going to rise, and it's a spiritual resurrection. Okay, and I'm making this. Well, let me go ahead and just proceed, and I'll clarify. So Paul's saying it's a spiritual resurrection, which coincides with what the Greeks believe in regards to resurrection. The Greeks believe that the body was decayed, and the body was not it's deteriorating. The body was just useless. It was garbage, and that there would be spiritual resurrection, right? There'd be spiritual resurrection. The Greeks believe this. And so that's the thinking of Paul. Remember, I said that Paul's supposed to be a Pharisee of the Pharisees. And this all relates to how he would be perceiving the law in the Old Testament, right? But he's speaking against it by saying that the body would be resurrected in spirit. And we see a pushback in the book of Luke about that. And so, but if you know, in the Old Testament, in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting torment." But note it's saying, those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting torment. In the book of Isaiah 26:19, it's stating that your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise, right? This is the Old Testament saying, the dead shall live, their bodies will rise, and you who dwell in the earth, dwell in the dust, will awake and sing joy, for your few is the dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. So we believe in Islam that before the day of judgment, alhamdulillah, which would be consistent with what we believe as Muslims, obviously, that the speech of Allah never changes. Man has come along and corrupted it. And alhamdulillah, we have Al-Furqan, the Quran, which is the criterion between what's right and wrong. When truth comes, falsehood must perish. Alhamdulillah. So we have the Quran today. But we believe in Islam that we're going to be resurrected on the day of judgment in our same physical bodies. And we're going to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment in the same body that we have now. And we'll all be naked before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's consistent. So I just wanted to make that point. But you see the pushback between what Paul is saying, and remember, the reason I'm bringing this up is because he's contradicting what the Torah has stated in the book of Isaiah and also in the book of Daniel.
But I don't think, Brother Kenny, that Paul was even reading the same Torah that the Jews had. I
Well,
mean,
yeah, I totally agree with that. So
he was
even
reading the Septuagint version. I
yeah,
mean,
and
how can a Pharisee of a Pharisee read a Septuagint when he should have read the Hebrew?
right. And so what you see here is issue upon issue, right? So that it's for one, how could a Pharisee, in regards to Paul, Pharisee of the Pharisees, so he proclaims, self-proclaimed, how could he speak against the Torah of Moses, uh, as an Orthodox Jew that he professes to be?
In other words, he's trying to say that he's the sheikh of a sheikh. You know what I mean?
So we have to realize in I think I like the from the angle that you presented and from the angle that I presented, we see a multitude of issues here, and they're all very consistent. They're all legitimate problems that Christians are simply going to have to face, and we mean that with no disrespect. But we have to realize that Paul's thinking is much closer to that of the Greek philosopher Philo than it would be to Moses, one of the greatest messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, peace and blessing be upon him. So Paul is once again undermining and betraying the Old Testament in the New Testament. So with what you've presented, what I presented, we see issue upon issue, and we see, as we mentioned in discussing, that we do see that the scribes have indeed, whether it's in the Old Testament and the issues that you presented in the Old Testament, or the issues that I've demonstrated in the New Testament, we see in the Old and the New Testament signs that there have been corruption in the Old Testament, and we know there's a multitude of contradictions in the New Testament as well. So alhamdulillah.
I just want to. No, of course, alhamdulillah. I want to just close it up quickly now, just by quoting a couple of more stuff, and then we'll close it down. We don't want to put too much pressure on our friends. I just want to elaborate more on the issues and scribal changes and problems found in the Old Testament. We read that. Okay, so according to the book of Deuteronomy, Moses wrote 13 scrolls, and he said, leave it in the ark of the covenant. We all know that. However, when we read the book of when we read in the Chronicles, we find out that when the followers brought back the Ark of the Covenant, the Torah wasn't in the Ark.
Yeah.
So no. This seems to be a problem. I mean, let's be consistent. Moses, according to the book of Deuteronomy, he writes the Torah with his hand, the laws. We've mentioned what the Torah means. It doesn't mean book of Genesis, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, all of that. It just means the laws, most probably the 613 laws. And you know what? I don't know if you know this, brother Kenny. The 613 laws were actually coined up by a rabbi as well. There is nothing in the Bible that says there has to be 613 laws. This was actually coined up by a rabbi. Yeah. So let's just say he wrote 630 laws or even 6,000 laws. The point here is that according to the Midrash, Deravim Rabbah 9:4 tells us that Moses wrote 13 scrolls. 13 scrolls. I don't know why I done 4. 13 scrolls. And from there, he placed it in the Ark of the Covenant. According to the book of Chronicles, when they opened the Ark of the Covenant, after Solomon's, they brought it back after the fight with the Philistines, there was no Torah inside, because it doesn't say there was a Torah inside.
Right.
Where did the Torah go? This to me is problematic. Ask yourself this. This to me is problematic. The Bible tells us that the Torah is supposed to be the preserved word of God. And Allah tells us in the Quran, it was entrusted to the Jews. The Torah was entrusted to the Jews, i.e. it was given to them as trust. You look after it.
Yes.
But then they could not look after it. So then think about it like this. If the Torah was not corrupted, then there would not have been no need of the Zabur, the Psalms. If the Psalm was not corrupted, there was no need of the Injil. If the Injil was not corrupted, there would not, do you see? So Well, for those time, for those prophets, for those people, and they used it, they distorted it. We have multiple. I mean, I'm really upset that I couldn't elaborate more, but inshallah, with you, I can make more videos very soon when you're free, and then we can elaborate more because I have so much information to share. But for now,
Yeah.
I want my Christian friends, my Jewish friends, my non-Muslim friends to open their mind and to open their heart and then ask themselves this question: is the Torah, is the Bible that they have in their hand the accurate preserved Bible that they always think that it is? I mean, this Bible itself, you say that it's preserved, but we don't even have the earliest manuscripts of that. I mean, what's the New Testament? The earliest full manuscript goes back, what, 4th century, 5th century?
Yeah.
I mean, according to the Bible, first John 5 7, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, etc. That would have been added what during the 9th century,
Yeah.
roughly 300 years after the advent of Islam.
Right.
So even after Islam, the corruption was taking place.
Absolutely.
The corruption of the Jews. I mean, think of it like this. I'll tell you quickly, brother. If Jesus was God, according to, and I'm just not, I don't want to change the subject because I know we're going to close now. We're going to close the video. If Jesus was God, then naturally the Jews would have come up to Jesus and said, "Look, since you're God, then can you tell us where is the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah.
And can you bring back the Ark of the Covenant so we can take the Torah out?"
Absolutely.
Why didn't the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the rabbis, the scribes, everybody go up to Jesus, even the disciples, and say, "Can you bring us the Ark of the Covenant? Since you are God, then naturally that won't be difficult for you." Why didn't Jesus bring back the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah.
Why did he make no mention? Jesus himself never spoke about the names of the books. He never said Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He never named any of the books. Now, Christians turn around and say, no, those names were given later. Seriously? Jesus, during the time of Jesus, there was no way of him explaining to us, oh, this book says this and that book says that. What did he refer them as? The law of Moses.
The law.
And what was he always quoting? He was quoting the law. He would say, Moses said, the law says the divorce. The lower law says this. Does not the law say that you should kill your child if he is disobedient to you? Why do you not follow the law? So he was constantly talking about the law.
Right. And he said, I've come not to abolish the law, but to confirm it. So
to fulfill it. So Paul himself, he had no idea about the law. I'm sorry to say, and with all due respect, and like I said, I said in the beginning, there is nothing about calling names or being derogatory, but I think that Paul himself, I don't know how to say, he must have been one
corrupt.
He was like a donkey. Do you know what I mean? Donkey with books.
I think he's self-serving. He was obviously out for himself.
Ignorant. Yeah, he had no knowledge. He was worse than an animal. Why? Because he corrupted the entire teaching of Jesus, peace be upon him. According to what we know, he made Jesus look like a god and made him sacrifice. He came for the original sins. Are you telling me God is so weak that he cannot forgive sins of mankind? I mean, what kind of nonsense is that God cannot forgive sins? What? Yeah. Okay, we tell a Christian, couldn't God forgive Adam and Eve? Well, he can. Why didn't he forgive them? Because then the fulfillment, then we can't have the fulfillment. What fulfillment? Of Jesus coming and dying for the sins. Okay, yeah, but God would have forgiven that already. Yeah, but then the fulfillment has to take place. What fulfillment? God makes, if he wants boof, he can destroy the earth like that. You know, there's Hadith Qudsi, and in Sahih al-Muslim as well. And I'm just paraphrasing it. And if brothers and sisters, after watching the video, they want to know more about the references, I can give it to them, because I don't want to, through time, because we're going to close now. Hadith Qudsi, we find, and in Sahih al-Muslim, I believe, that if Allah's majesty is not decreased or increased by the servants, by the people. So if people do bad or people do good, it doesn't increase or decrease his majesty. Because our situation does not affect God.
Right.
It doesn't affect God in any way. Right. Just the way, if let's just say, let me give you an example. Just the way, if a house collapses in India, it wouldn't affect you because that's got nothing to do with you, nor would it give you any benefit. Same way, in a similar way, I'm saying God, what we do, it doesn't affect God, because God does not need us in any way for his glory to be higher or lower. True or not true?
Absolutely.
Exactly, yeah. So there's a hadith, and I, like I said, if brothers and sisters want it on the video, please make mention of it, and I'll give a reference and all of that. I'm saying that according to Christianity, God is so limited that if he doesn't forgive Adam and Eve, then he's in trouble, and if he forgives them, then he's in trouble. It seems like, or do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, it doesn't seem like he's got a balance. Like, I have to forgive them, but I can't forgive them because I need my son to get killed for them. But if I do forgive them, then then I can't be a good father, and then my son's going to be left alone. Or some nonsense like that. It just doesn't make any sense.
Plus, my son that I'm the father of, at the same, I'm the my son that's me. I've got to die as my son be me for this to take place. And it's meaning no disrespect, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the gift of logic and reason, right? And he requires that we utilize this logic and we use it sensibly. And so these things they're simply, the more time you engage in this type of study, the more time you do research, the more time you open your mind to say, you know what, I'm not going to accept just everything that I hear somebody else tell me. I'm going to look into these matters myself and be open-minded enough to say, you know what, I want to seek the truth for the truth itself. And if you seek the truth for the truth itself, you're going to find it by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that's your intention. So,
and alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, that's correct. And just to close it up, is that according to the Bible, Jesus tells us to love thy neighbor, love thy enemy, pray for those who persecute you, pray for those who hurt you. If someone wants your shirt, give him your jacket. If someone wants this or your trousers, if someone slaps you on one cheek, give the other cheek. All of that, you know what I mean? Wicked, nice, round of applause. Yet God could not forgive Adam and Eve for eating an apple. Jesus wants you to forgive someone for killing your family and persecuting you and doing everything. Yet God could not forgive a man for eating an apple. What kind of a law is that? Jazakallah khair, brother Kenny. It's been a pleasure, talking to you and seeking so much information from you. And inshallah, more time soon. We'll get together and make more videos.
Inshallah.
And make series.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Send you a copy direct of the book when it comes out, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. We'll speak about it
in November. I know we've communicated online here and there, but the last time we did anything on video, I think it was November, inshallah. I don't know.
It was a very long time ago.
So inshallah, we'll get together and work on some other things. I highly respect the work that you and Ijaz do, Ijaz Ahmed.
Jazakallah khair.
Brothers are brilliant. There's no question about it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you in knowledge and accept all of your efforts. And, and once again, stressing the fact that we're not trying to attack Christianity. The debate that I have coming up at the end of April with this brother, I told him that we're gonna be discussing the deceptions of Paul, and I say, you know what, I'm a little bit reluctant about talking about that subject because I'm not used to being on the offensive in regards to. I don't mean it that way. But I'm so used to trying to defend Islam that I don't like being on the other side of the fence in regards to being
Of course, it'll be another side of you. But are you debating on Paul? So that's the discussion is on Paul.
Yeah, the deceptions of Paul is Paul.
And who is the debater?
And so but I'm so used to defending Islam that I don't want it to be perceived that I'm trying to attack Christianity or trying to.
No, you never attack though. This is not you.
But I'm only doing it, and I know that's your intention and your intention for Ijaz as well. Only do it in order so that we can open the minds of people to seek the truth. And I know they believe that they have the truth, but Okay, so
I mean,
you have to stop and
well,
consider.
like it's
I
true.
come from a Christian background, and I know from experience that the vast majority of Christians believe what they believe out of tradition. They haven't actually put forth true effort for themselves, and that's what I'm trying to simply encourage people to do, is to
Brother
simply
Kenny,
themselves.
um, who are you debating?
A.K. Manning, you've probably seen his ID.
Yeah,
Have you seen A.K. Manning?
I've seen him online. I've seen a few.
Yeah,
Puts a few
he's
stuff
actually
up. Doesn't
this brother. I actually have love in my heart for this brother. We've spent.
Where is he from? America.
He's in California, yes, and I've talked to him many times on the phone. One day I spent about literally about 3.5 hours. I was driving around Houston talking to him on the phone. We've had many conversations on the phone. We've had many.
No. But is he in the field of apologetic, or is he just one of those internet
Yeah, no,
trolls?
he's got the Manning evangelist organization of some kind, and so he's a very devout Christian. But I often say that he's the most Muslim Christian that I know, because he does.
Okay.
I know he has a natural inclination towards Islam for some reason. You know, there's so many things that he finds appealing, but and I don't mean anything offensive, but he's married to a preacher's daughter, and so there's a lot of dynamics there. It takes courage for someone to say, you know, what I've been taught all of my life, what I've depended on all of my life, is wrong. You know, come to that. You know, it takes courage. It takes a strong-minded individual to say. I'm not saying he's not strong-minded. I'm saying, but it takes courage to say, you know what I've been taught, what my forefathers have been taught, what my grandfather, my dad, and all on down the line, what they've been taught, and what's been passed on to me is incorrect. You know, and that takes courage, and especially when you're married to the daughter of a preacher. So, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide people to Islam, those whom He chooses, and it's our duty to share the truth and beauty of Islam, and that's all my intention is. And I know that's the same for you brothers as well. And we're not trying to.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair for your time and your hard effort. May Allah guide. May Allah give you more knowledge and blessing and barakah.
Ameen.
And guide us all towards the straight path.
Ameen.
Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair. And I will inshallah speak to you more soon. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.